Hi, everyone. There's a talk about robots on Trick A. You should go there. Uh, anyway, yeah, I'm going to speak about programming. Just a few words about me, if you don't know me. My name is Malte. I work as a software engineer at Google in Mountain View, California. I live in San Francisco. And I work on Google+, which is obviously the best social network in the world. As Holger said, there's going to be, it's my first talk, so I figured I might do something else than I usually do, and it's kind of an experiment. I'm quite comfortable going on stage, talking blah blah. I have those slides, and they guide you, and they really help with the presentation. So I figured, let's not have slides, at least not real ones. And then just talking about the presentation style. So there's my friend Ryan Dahl. Some of you might know him. He kind of invented this note thing. Which is kind of awesome, and he can really get into things. Like, he's super excited. He likes Chrome is such an awesome browser, and he likes it. And it's like he sounds like the 16-year-old girl who came from Kesha concert yesterday. He's super excited, so I'm going to try to emulate his style with his presentation. Bear with me. Anyway, what's this talk about? There's a couple topics. I want you to understand why people would become programmers. I want to talk about what it takes to become a programmer. How you personally, if you're not already a software engineer, how you could learn to become a programmer. And hopefully, basically, the kind of goal is that everybody goes home and says, fuck, yeah, I'm going to be a programmer. How does this work? Anyway, I mentioned it's a talk about programming. And if you think programming, you have to think about bacon. It's a very important concept when you want to understand programming, is that there is bacon. And if you're vegetarian, imagine deep-fried avocado. That's basically what bacon is. And so there's my friend, and his name is Aaron. And Aaron is a programmer, and he makes his own bacon, which is super awesome. And he's really into cooking, and every 4 weeks he kind of invites me to his house, and we have this awesome dinner, and it's like the best thing could ever happen to you. And he never really told me how he does this bacon thing, but it kind of drives me crazy, and I'm starting to think about it, and you have to imagine, it's like Oakland, everybody's a hipster, and you care about how your food is being prepared. So he would go to his butcher, and he's really close by, and they get talking, and the butcher explains that there's this pig, and he's really happy, and there's this farm right next to Oakland. It's really cool, and the meat is marble. It's freaking awesome. And then Aaron goes home, and he has his shed. So he also has a kitchen, but there's this shed, and I think he uses this shed mostly because he's not really into building stuff with his hands. So I think he's using the shed for making his bacon. And I think bacon involves essentially, taking the meat and then adding salt, and then doing that in the right way. And it turns out it's not really easy. So apparently he told me that the first time he made bacon, it tastes really awful. There was too much salt, kind of bad. And so it's like this craftsmanship experience where you start with experimenting, and then you have bacon, it doesn't taste good, you try again, it's better, and that's kind of the process. And the lesson here is that coding kind of is like that. So you can start really early, and kind of you're not so good, but then you try again. There's no really pain involved that you would not be able to try again. So you try again, and you have awesome bacon, and then you start making your own pastrami. Anyway, so much for Aaron. Let's talk a little bit about how I became a programmer. I was 12 or 13, and if you're German and from the north, you know this concept of Konfirmation. Essentially, it's a way to get lots of money, and you have to go to church, and you have to go to these classes, and it really sucks. But I got 1,300 marks or something, and I bought this Macintosh Performer, and it's really cool. I had a computer. Nowadays, obviously, it's super old. You're 12, you already have your 10th computer, but back then it was kind of a big thing. And that was in summer, and my birthday is in fall, and I wanted to be a programmer. So I asked my parents, can I be a programmer? And then they gave me for my birthday this nice shrink wrap box that it was I think it was yellow, this yellow, and it came with a software called Think C++, which turns out to be a C++ compiler. I should probably talk about C++. So C++ is a programming language, but it's not any programming language. It's bare bones, super hardcore, and Turns out it's really hard. So just for an analogy, imagine you're like, Dad, I really want a bicycle because I want to ride my bicycle. And then your birthday comes up, you're super excited, and you get like a welding machine and you build your own bicycle and it doesn't work. So this is kind of how I started programming. I figured, I got Latin in school. It'd be really awesome to have this translator that takes Latin and puts out German. And so this was like first project, and it didn't freaking work. It didn't work at all. Complete failure. I wasn't a programmer. Fast forward 1 year. I wanted to be a snowboarder, which is, way more appropriate, obviously, for a 14-year-old. So, and I was working at this company, and they were like programming, but only I was like, I was copying their manuals on a photocopier and binding them. That was my job. But they were using this programming language, and they had a book about it. So I got this book, and I went on the snowboarding vacation. And obviously, this was like '94. There was no iPads, there was no laptops, there was nothing like that, right? So I didn't have a computer with me. So I just had this book. And turns out, I read this book front to back, basically. And then I came home, and it was like magic. Basically, like I was a programmer. Like I went to my computer and started programming. And it was really cool. Like, pretty amazing. And if you have to mention, like, I was at this, I grew up in Schleswig-Holstein, and there was these two tiny boys building a computer game, and it was great. Like we actually took Warcraft 3, I think, and kind of stole the assets and meshed them up again, and had a computer game. It was magic. It's basically you have very, very tangible result from essentially just, putting stuff together, like point and click, a little bit of programming, really, really nice. And so what we can really learn from this is there's this very intelligent guy called Larry Wall. Larry Wall, if you don't know him, he invented this programming language called Perl, which lots of people really hate. But it turns out he wasn't only a computer scientist, he was also a linguist. And he had this theory, which is very important and very insightful, that when you're a child and you're like 2-year-old and you learn to speak, it's not really the same as this sophisticated like Germanistic student thing, right? So there's like a range, and the same range exists for programming. And it's super cool to write in baby language. And it's also super cool to write in the super sophisticated language. But it doesn't matter. You can be a programmer in baby language, and you can still build things that are really awesome. So it's worth trying. It's not that there's this huge learning step, and you never get there. It's super easy. So message is don't fear trying, and just try again. Speaking about like what makes programming special? And so, I was speaking about my friends, and I was thinking, like, did I ever know anybody who was a good musician? It turns out not really. So I have this anonymous musician, and it just got me thinking, like, how does music work? It must be really great to have a great talent for music. And you sit in your apartment every night, and you kind of play on your guitar, and you practice really hard. You make more money, you buy a new guitar, and then at some point it's like, boom, frick, I get a melody. It's awesome. So isn't that great? It's kind of like programming, because you program and then you have a game, right? It's cool. So there might be something there that programming is like making music. There's subtle differences, and I want to point them out by making a small vote. So who here in this room knows somebody or more than one person that's very, very good at inventing melodies? I don't know, it's like five hands. And who here knows somebody who is good at programming? Right? It's kind of, these votes are, of course, bullshit. Obviously, everybody is a programmer. It's easy, right? It's not like there's the creative concept is not dictated by talent. Everybody can be a programmer. You just have to try. last fancy vote. Who knows anybody who has like a hobby? Yeah, lame, I know. Because I wanted to talk about my dad. So my dad, turns out, he's into building carports. So carports are these like things. They have a rooftop and like maybe not walls, but like they stand up and you can park your car. Like it's really cool. So he built like 6 carports in his life, like for himself, for his sister, for his grandma, for his like practice, and many more carports. And they get like better every time. And I think he kind of makes a plan. Then he goes shopping at this like awesome hardware store and buys this wood. It's super freaking awesome. And then he builds it, and it's great. And he builds the next one. And which is weird, right? Because he's a doctor. He like works really hard, 5 days a week on that. And then he comes home and starts working on this carport. And it's like a 7 days a week job. And why would you do that? And obviously nobody would ask this question because it's super easy to figure out. You do this because it's fun. You like building things. Humans apparently like to build stuff, which is interesting. And so programming is basically where you have a job and it's all like building carports. It's like you have you're building shit all the time. It's great. But lots of people have like hobbies, and most of them involving like taking stuff, putting them together, and building stuff. The great thing about programming is that it scales. So I mentioned earlier that my dad built like 6 carports. So he's like twice as old as me, or like I don't know, maybe more. And turns out that I have written more than 6 programs in my life. It's many more. I've probably written 6 programs this year. So it really scales. You can do this all your time, and people even pay you for it, which is cool. But still, it's a hobby. It's like a hobby. You go do it. I found this actually really recently, an awesome quote by Linus Torvalds. If you don't know Linus, he's the inventor of Linux, which is the operating system that essentially everybody's using nowadays. And he said this: I like trying to make things work better. In many ways, the end result is unimportant. It's really just the excuse for the whole experience. And that's how you that's how you describe a hobby, right? You build things, and it's really not as important like what comes out at the end. It's more important that you do it, right? You work in your garden. It's awesome. It's nice, and later you're like happy that your garden is nice, but it was also really cool to actually do the shit. And that's why he continues. This is why I started Linux to begin with. Sure, I kind of needed an operating system, but I needed a project much, much more than I needed an operating system. So he just wanted something to work on, and it turned out to be this really successful operating system. But he just did it because he was into programming. Okay, well, now we talked about like me and my dad, and I want to continue with this other dude. This guy here, his name is Jad, and he's my friend, and he's like the nicest person on the world, like really, where he's like perfect in every sense, and you're super embarrassed about yourself when you meet him, because he's like so perfect. But then he makes you embarrassed in this weird way where you then feel better about yourself, and you like him even more, which is super weird. I think like that's how religious leaders work. They embarrass you and they make you feel bad, and then you like them. Super weird. And so anyway, Jad, he lives in Japan, and turns out he isn't actually a programmer, at least not in his day job. Jed is a translator, and his job is essentially, to take a manual that Sony wrote in Japanese and translate it into English. And so you have an English manual with your TV, right? And I like Jed, but it to me just doesn't sound like the, best job ever, right? It's not really creative. I'm sure there's like these translation geeks like find it awesome. You have this translation, and it's really beautiful. It's even better in English than in Japanese, but it's not really. It doesn't resonate with me. I don't find it interesting. So, but Jed, being Jed, he's like super content with his life because I mean, he's obviously perfect, and he's a translator by day and a programmer by night. And it turns out like he continually builds shit, and he puts it out like on Twitter, and like people are like, what the hell is this? Like you don't understand it. You look at it and, ooh, he's smart, and so that's really weird. But then you go to a conference. Basically a conference like this conference, but people like are not dressed as well, and people talk about programming. And Jed is there and has these slides where like Steve Jobs would go and, whoa, I can't believe they did this, so awesome. And he like explains it to you so well, probably because it's a translator, and he can really like get you with this thing. And so he's like, he can really explain to everybody the most complex concepts, and he isn't even a computer scientist. So there's definitely a total disconnect between being a computer scientist and being a good programmer. Really, you just have to try. You can be like, I don't know, super old, like 30. Oh, no, I'm 32. Like 40, and still be a programmer. Cool. Even more. I got these friends again, and they're Michael and Max. Max is the guy with the awesome beard. And Michael, he always writes these blog posts, and they're like super eloquent, and I don't agree, but I can't like argue with him because he's so like smart. And so what these guys do is, they have a startup. Like, I mean, everybody in the Valley kind of has a startup, so it's not really exciting. But the way they do their startup is kind of cool. So, but they don't have an office. If you think like your Friedrichshain super loft office is nice, these guys have figured out much better. What they bought was not an office, they bought bicycles. Specifically, Max, he bought a tandem. And the story is that he basically drove through Oakland on his tandem, and then a girl jumped onto the back seat, and now they're really happy together. So just smart advice, if you want a girlfriend, get a tandem. And obviously, like at least in San Francisco, if you were such a bird, like all the girls love you. So they have a bicycle, and they use it to do something they call bike code food. So what they do is they bike around Oakland and San Francisco, and then they go to like these awesome hipster-style coffee places where if you go in and order the latte, they're like, whoa, what the hell? How could you put like milk in your coffee? Instead, they take like these weird, Southern American special kind of cat shit things, and like then take like 621 milligrams of water and do like 99 degrees Celsius, and then they kind of drip it for 4 minutes like a German beer, and it's like the super awesome coffee, that kind of place. So they go there, it's really nice, and then they program at this thing, and then they drink the coffee, and when it's empty, they go back on their bike and go drive around again. And then they, kind of have this nice lunch, and it's really like a whole lifestyle within programming. So there's also essentially, you don't have to like sit in your basement and don't shave your beard. I mean, obviously you don't, but you can be part of life and still be a programmer. It's almost like an actual subculture developing that's certainly not in any way, what you would in the 20 years ago like laugh upon as geeky. Right. Last but not least, there's my, not really friend, because I only met her once, but her name is Mary Rose. And Mary's a programmer too, and she spoke at this conference, JSConf 2012, which is a conference about JavaScript. And she had the first talk ever that made me personally cry. So I wanted to talk about her talk. And it was kind of a talk like my talk about programming, only though it was obviously much better. And she talked about her experience as a programmer. So it turns out back then she lived in Berlin. She has since moved back to London. And in Berlin, she was like working at this company as a programmer, and she didn't really like it. Went like to Berghain every weekend, got drunk, partied, drugs, whatever, and kind of sucked. And Then she decided, to start over and learn programming again. And so she decided to make a computer game. It's called Pistol Slut. You should Google it with Safe Search on. And she kind of started working on it, and then her friends called her, and she didn't have time because she had to work on this computer game. And so it turns out, like, making computer games, it's really not that easy because it involves math. And everybody hates math. Imagine there's like these two objects, and they move on the screen, and boom, they detect. Turns out, like, measuring the point where these two collide, called collision detection, actually not that easy. So you have to think about it. And you kind of read these math books, and you don't understand it, but turns out, like, you can actually program stuff you don't understand. You just write it down. And if it doesn't work, you kind of, tweak it again and try again, and then you tweak it again, and it's like 2 a.m. in the morning, and then still doesn't work, and you tweak it again, and it's 5 a.m., and eventually it works. And you have this program, and you can play it. It's like your game, and you can show your grandchildren, and let them play. And you can then go to a conference and talk about it. And then other people go to other conferences and talk about your talk. So it's really cool. And she obviously became a very happy programmer and moved to London, where they pay you more for programming. So, kind of summary. You heard me talk about, like, Aaron, about me, my dad, this anonymous musician, Jad, Max, Michael, Mary, and I think I tried to kind of communicate that you don't really have to be a computer scientist to program. If you're, like, great at cooking, you're probably a really good programmer. You can really become part of this, like, hip subculture in Oakland. And obviously, you can go snowboarding and become a programmer, which is, I think, an awesome combination. Because programming is awesome. You should do it. You can make stuff you show your grandkids, and who wouldn't want that? Can go snowboarding, and then learn a program. And what you should do in order to do this is buy this book called Eloquent JavaScript. It's a modern introduction to programming. It really goes from the ground up. It's even if you're like a seasoned software engineer, it's very, very interesting to actually learn this shit all over again, because you might have like learned about it, using discovery and like abstract math-style computer science courses. This really is something where you can just read it all the way through, and afterwards you're a programmer, and it's really cool. All right, thanks.